name is Iva Sasheva. Thank you all for being here today. I'm glad that Nicola was able to explain to you how exactly I feel right now, because I'm an artist. I'm not a theater person or a public speaker, so please excuse me. I will help myself with this little device here to tell you my story. I would like to start by reading you a poem which is called How to Paint a Portrait of a Bird by Jacques Prévert. The English translation is by one of my favorite authors, Nikolai Grozny. In the beginning, paint a cage with an open door. Then paint something beautiful, something simple, something elegant, something useful for the bird. Afterward, place the canvas against a tree, in a garden, in a park, or in a forest. Hide behind the tree, saying nothing, keeping still. Sometimes the bird arrives quickly, but it could also drag its feet for years before making a decision. Don't be discouraged. Wait even if it takes years. The fastness or slowness of the bird's arrival is of no consequence to the success of the painting. When the bird arrives, if it arrives, keep completely silent. Wait for the bird to enter the cage, and when it enters, gently close the door with a paintbrush. Then, erase one by one all the bars, taking care not to touch any of the feathers of the bird. Make next a portrait of the tree, choosing the most beautiful amongst its branches for the bird. Paint also the green foliage and the freshness of the wind, the solar dust, the noise of the tree insects in the summer heat. And then wait for the bird to start singing. If the bird does not sing, it's a bad sign. It's a sign that the painting is bad. But if it sings, it's a good sign. It's a sign that you could sign it. So, gently pluck one of the bird's feathers and write your name in the corner of the painting. One of the first questions people ask me after I tell them that I'm an artist is, what do you draw? I learned through the years that if I want to escape further questions, I need to be quite specific. I can tell them I work in animation, or I draw for films, or I'm an illustrator, and typically they will continue to tell me about their own interest. But if I tell them I draw so I can express myself, I draw my thoughts and feelings, normally they will ask me, so what do you do for a living? Grown-ups love numbers, Exupéry said in The Little Prince. By narrowing down my field of work to something well-known like an illustrator, I will help them deduce my income, my lifestyle, and my place in the society. They will hold on to some imaginary numbers, and by those numbers they will think they have come to know me. But if I tell them I draw so I can learn about myself and the world, I draw so I can converse with myself and the world, they will get confused and most likely advise me to go and find a proper profession. I started my art education when I was 10. My mom collected my drawings in a binder, and together we went to meet my future art teacher. Her classes were designed to prepare students for the different schools of art, and the National School of Fine Arts was my choice, which was at that time one of the most difficult to get into. I remember that during this meeting, my teacher was looking carefully at my drawings while explaining to my mom that her classes are full and I was far too young to start with intense art lessons at that young age. While she was talking, she paused on a small watercolor I drew when I was 5 or 6 years old. It was a vase with 2 flowers in it and a 3rd flower outside the vase suspended in midair. I still wonder what she saw in that little drawing to make her so certain I'm worth her time. But 1 year later, aged 11, I was already ready with the basics for the exam. That age, I printed my first etching. My art teacher had opened doors to a new world, magic world, enchanting world, the possibilities of which were completely endless. For the remaining 2 years before the exam, I started to work under her guidance on more complicated drawings, compositions with people studying the great master's work. Eventually, I was accepted into the high school. That gave me much needed ateliers for printing and sculpture when I can really devote myself to perfect my skills and study the various techniques of fine art. Most of the teachers there were supportive, except one who refused to address the girls in class. His explanation was that once the girls have family and children, they will no longer care about art, and there's no point in wasting time or knowledge on them. You can imagine that for a young person that could be a dream crusher. And the ghost of his words had haunted me for years, really making me doubt myself at some times, and at the other, motivating me, albeit for all the wrong reasons, to overwork myself to complete exhaustion. After high school, the logical continuation of my work and my education was the Academy of Fine Arts. Near the Academy, there was an animation studio. A friend of mine introduced me to the people there, and that introduction led to a number of animation projects I was involved in. Another 2 years in a major animation studio abroad, and many, many sleepless nights. Yet working in animation was not my primary interest, so once I was presented with the opportunity to work as a storyboard artist for feature films, I was ready. I remember this first meeting with the film director at the office of the film company. I was very pregnant with my second child at the time, and he asked me about my experience. I said I had none. He smiled and scribbled some lines on a piece of paper. He said, "Draw me those scenes by tomorrow," and I left. The next day I was hired for my first movie, and for the next 3 years I worked as a chief storyboard artist on more than 25 features. I graduated the Academy of Fine Arts with honors and 2 MFA degrees, and I managed to have a solo exhibition in London. I do believe that the right teacher comes when the student is ready, but I also believe that on the path of learning, the obstacles and the lack of understanding and support will always be present. Nevertheless, the one who is prepared to learn can draw inspiration, experience and wisdom from both the support and the lack of it. Criticism is healthy for creativity, but prejudice and dogmatism are not criticism, and therefore they're harmful. So one needs to learn to distinguish between the two and find the difference. However, it's not as easy as it sounds. For some times, I felt a strong desire to prove my high school teacher wrong. Eventually, I came to realize that my sole motivation for doing what I do was always and will always be my love for drawing. Still, the idea that I was not truly the artist I once dreamt of becoming stayed with me, and although I continued to work on more feature films, hundreds of ads and idea presentations, graphic novels, children's books, illustration, and literary novels, I was longing for the time that I can sit in my studio and create. I had the numbers, but I was not ready to count them yet. I was missing the most essential, the invisible to the eye, the connection with myself. Picasso once said, "It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child." And I think I finally was beginning to understand what he meant. I had all the skills. I could draw everything that possibly comes to mind, in every possible technique. I knew the language, but I had no voice. I remember the words of the Little Prince again. When you tell grown-ups you made a new friend, they never ask you any questions about essential matters. What does his voice sound like? Does he collect butterflies? What games does he like best? I decided to befriend myself and ask the essential questions. I set a goal to create a space where my new friend self and I can meet every day and have a conversation. No questions were to be forbidden. Draw me a ship, I will say. Sure, my self-friend will answer. I can draw you a flock of sheep if you wish. I can draw them animated or comical or fairy tale-ish or abstract if you want. No, I said. Draw me the first sheep you ever saw in your life. Draw me how it made you feel when your grandfather took you to that place where 4 baby lambs were just born and they jumped around the room when one of them landed in your lap and fell asleep. How was I supposed to draw that? None of my skills were useful enough to paint that memory, and none of them good enough to paint laughter or sadness or love. From that moment on, this new friend I made of my own self and I spent many hours together drawing sheep and joys and worries. As our relationship deepened, we no longer needed a big, fancy studio to meet. We could happily meet in the coffee places or outside on the steps of the building or in the park, as long as we stayed truthful and honest to each other. My friend and I were once again becoming one and the same person, because the trust we created between us bonded us together. Sometimes it needs only one person to believe in you, and many of the times this one person can be your own self. In time I realized that this new relationship had affected all the areas of my life. For example, I will have a new story to illustrate, and unlike before, when I will take the story, count the number of illustrations needed, pick the best angles, choose the most appealing colors, and do what I do best, this time I needed to relive the story. I needed to step in it, step in someone else's shoes, and see how that feels. The best way to draw a story is not from the best angles. It is only from the perspective you see once you are in the story. And the colors are the colors you experience. The characters are no longer some abstract subjects, but they are your family, your friends, and your foes. You are no longer the observer, disconnected from the story. You dare to step in it, connect with the characters, and see the world through their eyes. That needs empathy and truthful voice. It is still an ongoing journey of discovery of this enchanting world of knowledge and art I entered when I was a child. I'm still curious and ready to travel, but there are few things I learned along the way. Gather as much knowledge as you can. Learn the language of your craft, because otherwise you will sound illiterate no matter what you think. Meet yourself and start a conversation. Meet new friends, and most importantly, ask the questions about the essential matters. Thank you.